over the years, I've created so many different models, whether it's around negotiation or time mastery or feedback or change without resistance. But that has a downside, which you've just hit the nail on the head, which is that it's actually quite hard to present myself. One is analysis paralysis and attempting to plan the unplannable.
Yes.
Yeah, when everything changes in weeks, a 5-year plan is useless. However, on the other side, we might think, well, in that case, we just have to make every decision now. I loved working with the people so much, I carried on, which professionally was a mistake. Personally, it's enriched my life.
So that gives you a little taste of my conversation with Roy Marriott. In this episode, we cover how to present a deep, multi-layered skill set without overwhelming the people you're trying to reach, how to test a new market before you go all in and reshape your entire brand around it, and one deceptively simple question that can help you cut through the busy work and focus on what actually moves the needle in your business. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil. My next guest spent his early life trying to master machines until burnout, Buddhism, and a whiteboard helped him discover that his real work was helping technical leaders grow into the people they really want to be. Roy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Well, I'm excited for our conversation. So, Roy, before we get into coaching, I want to start with that 10-year-old boy who was already running tiny businesses, painting cars, and apparently charging school friends 100% interest on crisp money. What do you remember about that early instinct to make things, to solve problems, and maybe make a little money along the way?
Well, when you asked that question about making things, I'm remembering school holidays spent in the garage with a saw or a soldering iron. And yeah, absolutely making things. I was really, loved to make things. And I've always been someone who's sort of driven by ideas. If I've got a cool idea, I'm motivated, I'm engaged, I'm passionate, I'm doing things. And I guess I just had this cool idea of, when people wanted cars painted, it just seemed natural to, by the way, we are talking cars that are that big. We are talking tiny little box cars. And when we're talking about crisp money, we're talking about 1 penny. And maybe I'd ask to get another, 2 pennies the following day, because it's harder to get smaller than that.
Yeah.
So I was playing.
Yeah. And is that something your parents encourage? Because one of the things I remember you telling me is that they both work, I think, for the income tax department, was it? Yeah.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like entrepreneurship you were surrounded by it, or so.
Absolutely not. I mean, the idea of charging money for things was income tax people understand money. So I had a surprising understanding of the need for capital investment at the age of 10, but. No, it wasn't that I was following in my father's footsteps. No.
Yeah.
And I think it's except that in the Second World War, my father was installing radar on aeroplanes.
Okay, there you go.
Maybe that's the connection to my inheritance
of tinkering and building and soldering, like you said, because it's not
right at the cutting edge.
It's pretty unusual for 10-year-olds to be in the garage,
especially back then. Yeah.
Although I feel like we've sort of lost that now. Kids are not even allowed to be near a hammer or a nail, right? Which I think is a shame, because how else do you sort of learn? Both the good and bad of it.
There was a very interesting conversation between my parents around that. So. My mother wanted me to have a blunt saw, and my father was like, "No way, that is the most dangerous thing." So that was something I learned from my father and around that as well.
Yeah, and I think that may be a separate podcast, but I think there's a lot of debate around how we've sort of moved to the other extreme now.
Absolutely.
So I want to keep moving forward now. We've jumped beyond 10. Now, you had this meteoric early success in your career, right? Cambridge, BT, HP Labs. And then you said it all went sideways because your answer was, I need to try harder, until you burned yourself out, right? So tell me a little bit about what did hitting that wall actually look like in your day-to-day life?
Oh, it was very simple. I mean, it looked like no one saw me because I was ill.
Yeah.
Um, I, I, um, I remember flying back from a conference in Vancouver, going straight to Edinburgh for a meeting, a few days meeting that happened to be arranged at the same time as the festival. Um, so it was very much burning the candle at both ends. And after that, I remember at the end of that being exhausted, but, surprise, surprise. But somehow I didn't quite recover. I was sort of firing on seven cylinders for a few months and then just sick. And every time I tried to come back to work, I'd get knocked back. So I was actually off sick for 2 years completely. And then
Wow.
another year I was working half time.
Yeah, and it wasn't like you were miserable or unhappy, right? You were just sort of, like you said, you were enjoying what you were doing. You were
Yeah.
feeling challenged, but you were just not stopping.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a huge part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
then you mentioned to me that there was this moment when an older colleague sat you down in front of a whiteboard. Now, he didn't give you advice. He asked you questions, listened, and wrote things up on that board. And you said by the time he reached the bottom of the board, you knew what to do, right? So tell me,
Exactly.
when you walked away from that whiteboard, um, did you know in that moment that you had found the work you were meant to do? How did that unfold?
I think that realization came later.
Yeah.
I think the way it unfolded was, I mean, I was a geeky kid, and I just thought I wasn't that good with people. And then I got sent at the Packard on various leadership development programs and learned that you can learn about communication.
Right.
And that lit the touch paper. So from then on, I was just passionate about learning about communication and did all sorts of things around NLP and solution focus, and just really, really explored this world of developing as a person, developing in relation to other people. And I think gradually in that, I mean, and that naturally involved conversations with others. Um, and I mean, remember, this is before coaching was a thing. The International Coaching Federation didn't exist back in those days. Um, so at the time, I was thinking in terms of therapy,
Right.
because it was about people growing and developing. It was about these conversations. But gradually, it became clear that actually it was about helping people really thrive. And I've always loved, well, put it the other way around. There was a realization for me that we were living in boxes.
Right.
So we would, as a society, increasingly, we'd get up and get some food out of a box and while watching the box, and then get in a box and drive that box to a slightly bigger box that was in a huge box, and then look at another box while working away. And then at the end of the day, reverse the process, feel frustrated, go home, drive home in the box, sit and have dinner in front of the box. And I wanted a life that was much more human than that. So I think putting all those ingredients together, it gradually became clear that, my real strength as a person is interacting with people one on one. And I love listening to people's stories. I love drawing out people's stories. And what I've ended up with is a profession that's about helping people to have better stories than the ones they came with.
Yeah.
So the
So
real satisfaction for me is when someone comes into a coaching session and they're feeling somewhere between terrible and meh, and they've got some kind of something they want to talk about.
yeah.
I think they're a bit stuck with. They want to make progress, and then by the end of the session, their body changes, their face is lit up, they know exactly what they're going to do, they're full of enthusiasm, and they go off and do it. And next time I hear how the story continued in a really good way, that's how I get my satisfaction.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, maybe I can give you credit for being the first person to think out of the box, right? I mean, it sounds like you did this a lot earlier than a lot of people. Now, what's interesting to me is you also mentioned to me that your mother tried to stop you from leaving HP, right? She tried to do everything she could in her power. So
She
what
did.
gave you the conviction to go anyway? Because in those days,
I'd
not
already,
many people left a steady job. Yeah.
I'd already handed in my notice by the time she caught up. What gave me the conviction? I mean, it. So one of my Buddhist teachers told me a story,
Yeah.
and it was just a story that he was on a ski slope as a complete beginner, and he was he'd been introduced to, as he described it, the most beautiful skier you've ever met, who happened to be, I don't know, Olympic champion or something, and an instructor. And she just said, "Watch me," and skied down some moguls, some quite technical skiing. And then at the bottom, looked up and said, "Just do what I did."
Uh, uh,
And he did.
wow.
And he flowed down the ski slope somehow, goodness knows how, and reached the bottom and looked back and just went, "That's how I want to live my life."
Huh. That's amazing. I love that story.
And
And
he was such an inspiration for me
yeah,
that, yeah, when when there was doubt, I remember thinking that, I want to live my life like that, not in a very safe, ordinary pedestrian kind of way.
or in that box that you just described so beautifully, right? Yeah, that a lot of us spend more time than we want to in that because we think that's the path or that's the way it should be, right? I remember when I quit my job, my parents were flabbergasted. Even they were like, Why would you leave a secure, steady, job that you could retire in to jump out into the unknown or
Mm.
stumble
And
down that ski slope using your analogy."
and then when you say it like that, put step it into the unknown. I mean, that's precisely why.
Yeah. Yeah, but and the other thing which is really interesting is more often than not in these conversations, and I think this is the 86th one I'm having. There is like a mentor or somebody who has guided the person, right, and sort of allowed them to find their wings to
Mm,
make this leap.
absolutely, absolutely. And to be completely honest, I do wish I'd had something of a business mentor when I did that. I
Well,
think
yeah, good.
I took the leap because I love the work.
Yeah.
The running of a business, that's a different story.
We're going to get into that, so we'll get into that part of it because I think that's something a lot of solopreneurs is a bit of a rude awakening, if you like, when you follow your passion, right? That there is the other half to the coin that you also have to start becoming au fair with and deal with. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about brand building and marketing.
Okay.
So you have this wonderful combination, I should say, of tech, Buddhism, NLP, mindfulness, solution focus, agile, MCC-level coaching, supervision, and a new book, right? So when people first meet you, do they see the whole pattern or do they usually only understand it after they've experienced you?
I'm not sure that many people understand the whole pattern. I'm not even sure I do, but yeah, it's been. So you remember I talked about the boy being full of enthusiasm and energy and always new ideas.
Yeah.
That has a downside in that I think, I'm always trying new things. Within solution focus,
Yeah.
I'm famous for having. I'm not sure if it's uh, if it's a good thing or if it's a sort of a neurotic obsession. But over the years, I've created so many different models, whether it's around negotiation or time mastery or feedback or change without resistance. So all of these different things, I love creating new things. I love developing new things. And that's the thread that's run through, from being a software developer to being a coach and a trainer and a developer of applications. But that has a downside, which you've just hit the nail on the head, which is that it's actually quite hard to present myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've even had people say, I mean, there was someone who had been very satisfied with my coaching, who then saw my CV and said, "God, if I'd seen all of that, I'd never have come for coaching with you because it's too much. I'd think I wasn't worthy." And that's so completely not who I am. I yeah, very approachable, I would say. But yeah, that's a real ongoing challenge, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's a tough one, right? And also, I think the breadth and depth is really valuable, and it's what makes you distinct. But how you present that can be overwhelming to people, right? That's the piece that is always hard to sort of find the balance. And I always say it's more about sharpening the tip of the spear and understanding how and where the relevance fits, rather than just throwing everything out
Exactly.
there, right? And that's something a lot I struggle with myself, because I've done a lot of different things after I left Ogilvy in 2008 that didn't neatly fit into a box, right? And initially I would just talk about all of it, thinking that that would make me more valuable and somebody would see that as, wow, I want to work with him. Until I realized, no, that just makes people feel overwhelmed and they don't know where to start. There's no front door. That's the way I like to describe it. There needs to be one front door. You can have a lot of furniture inside, but it can't be sitting outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so let me ask you another way. If you talked about a client who just hired you and then looked at your resume. So if that client had to explain why they choose you, what do you think they would say?
I mean, in that particular case, we were matched.
Yeah.
um,
But they enjoyed working with you, right? They got benefit out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what he would say would be that, in fact, what he did say was that I helped him to get where he needed to get to much more quickly than he'd imagined possible by being completely focused on him and his
Yeah.
situation, and not, here's my toolkit, wait for half an hour while I bring it all in. Much more, tell me about you, tell me where you want to get to. Let's find a way of getting there. And it turned out that where the key to the progress he wanted was something he would never have thought of, given it's sort of like he was, if he was coming through the front door of a house and then he discovered that the answer was a helicopter sitting on the roof.
Yeah.
And it's his house, not mine.
Yeah. Right.
But he didn't know there was a helicopter there.
Mm. Absolutely. And I think that is a mistake a lot of coaches make, is they lead with their methodology or their frameworks, right? Exactly. And then it sort of becomes like you're running somebody through the process versus saying, I have a toolkit. Now let's figure out what's most useful for you based on where you are and what your situation is. Like you said, what needs to change or evolve. So I think that's a really important distinction that, gets lost in coaching sometimes.
Absolutely.
So now I want to go back and touch on what you mentioned a minute ago, right? About the craft and the business side of it. Now, you said something incredibly honest during our pre-call. You told me, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a coach. Now, I think that strikes a chord with so many solo experts who love the craft. They love what they do, working with the clients, but they feel uneasy about the business around the craft, right? So tell me, what's been the hardest part for you in terms of stepping out from behind the quiet work of coaching, which you clearly love and are passionate about, and letting people see the value of what you do?
I'm going to frame that slightly differently, actually,
Go ahead.
because I have come to love being out front and on stage. I was shy at first, but over the years, I really, if I've got something great to say, I love saying it, and I've become more and more and more confident about that over the years.
Okay.
So it's not about being seen, and it's not about telling people my value. I mean, there are many coaches out there who sort of say, "Oh, I'm not worthy," and they'll charge ridiculously small fees. And my advice to them is, stop it.
Yeah.
charge a good rate, because you are worth it. And I'm completely confident with that as well myself. The challenge for me, and even around being an entrepreneur, I love the idea of businesses.
Mhm.
So, finding a niche, finding customers who want particular things, discovering what the value is they really want, presenting that as being, here's how I serve you. I love all that, and I'm full of ideas. So again, ideas are my downfall, because
Yeah.
I've got too many of them.
Right.
And there are so many different places where I have worked, and I do work, that I have occasionally really focused down on a particular area,
Mhm.
and then and then lost work because of it. And I know this is very controversial in the world of marketing, of coaching, and but actually the people have seen how specific I am, and they go, "Oh, well, that's not me, so we won't hire him." So I've always been in the position where my work's come to me through my network.
Okay. So you haven't had to go out and sort of fish for it, or
Well, I have gone out to fish for it,
yeah.
and there's a guy called Ian Brody, who was a
Mhm.
marketing coach for coaches and consultants, and he tells this fantastic story around fishing, of one particular fisherman who was like 10 times more effective than all the other fishermen, because he thought like a fish rather than like a fisherman.
Fisherman. Yeah.
So I absolutely took that on
Mhm.
when I was approaching the world of agile coaching. So the backstory is I'd done 3 or 4 probes into different markets to see which one might suit me.
Yeah.
I had the hypothesis that maybe agile coaches would want to learn great coaching skills from myself and colleagues. And, so I started thinking like a fish, and I started going to agile conferences and learning about agile. And because that was my technical background, I was like, wow, this is what I was trying to do with my research 20 years ago, and this is how it's matured. This is amazing. And I really, got on incredibly well with all the people who had come up through that area. And I still, was in the pub with them a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I got taken for a fish, not a
Huh.
fisherman. So I did, I've tried many approaches to finding my own work.
Yeah.
I think the effect of that has been that many people have got to know me, and then work has come along, but it's almost never been the work I've been out there trying to get.
That's interesting. So let's stick with the agile story for a second. Now, one of the
Yeah.
things you mentioned when you first told me that story was that also that people were recommending you, though, right, in
Yeah,
the community,
yeah,
even though you're not an agile coach. So it's like,
yeah,
but
yeah.
so actual work didn't come from it, but clearly they were seeing something in you and recommending you, right? What do you think that was?
When I got my Buddhist name,
Yeah.
my preceptor, who gave me the name, said that he wanted to celebrate qualities of energy and enthusiasm.
Okay.
And so my Buddhist name is Shakya Kumara, and the Kumara means youth, which was the energy and enthusiasm, and prince, which was who I could become. And Shakya is the Buddha's family name.
Okay.
So I think that energy and enthusiasm, and maybe something of the prince, I don't know. Maybe that's what they were seeing. Another story there is that the first time I went to an agile meetup in Cambridge, they were doing 10-minute talks. And what I decided to do as a 10-minute thing, I decided not to do a talk, but to coach everyone in the room simultaneously.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 10 minutes, I said, okay, so who got who got something from that, who found a way forward with something they were stuck with. And, something like maybe just over half the room put their hands up. And one of the people in that room decided at that point she wanted to be a coach.
Wow. Okay.
So I think there was something there about, in the same way that sitting in front of that whiteboard, I'd seen some magic. Maybe I'm communicating some of that magic as well when I share what I do.
Yeah, and I guess that's the other part of it, right? Because connecting that to business, you can be really good at what you do, but connecting that to sort of business is also still is where the trick is, right? And that takes time. So do you feel like you love experimenting? So clearly, I mean, that's a good. You need to sort of listen to the market and refine. But do you feel like you're changing lanes too often? Is that what part of the problem might be? Or
I think that's very likely to be part of the problem. Yeah.
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 So if we go back to Ian Brody now, you mentioned that you sort of have clarity on your ICP now, right? So you clearly have an idea of the technical leaders you love to coach. Let me ask you, what are they actually really swimming toward, keeping with that analogy, or swimming away from that most people miss?
The thing is, remember that my unique special sauce is that every client is unique.
Yeah.
So I'm not coming forward with, here is the answer to all your problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming forward with, tell me what you're struggling with, and I'll help you to really make progress with that.
Sure.
So
are you seeing some patterns, some similarities? That's what I'm looking for more than, specifically
sure. Yeah. So what patterns and similarities am I seeing in tech leaders? I mean, this is almost too trite, but it's like, okay, AI? What do we do with that then?
Right.
I think if I was to share one thing that could be relevant for every single tech or other leader, it would be to refer them to Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2. Because what I'm seeing is that organizations are increasingly expecting things to be done in minutes.
Yes.
And decisions are taken with System 1, which sometimes is exactly what you need. But sometimes what's needed is the time to stop and actually reflect and actually think, where is the real value here? So I'm seeing a tendency to, I mean, if you look at the industry as a whole, it's like, we've got AI that makes people more efficient, therefore we can save lots of money by making people redundant. Whoops, we can't do it anymore. We're going to have to hire people back. That story's been seen quite a lot. If you look on my LinkedIn feed right now, you'll see a story I shared where IKEA did something different. They said, okay, now our customer service people don't have to handle so many of the routine calls. What can they be doing instead? And they got trained in interior design skills so that they could actually really help customers to make great buying decisions, and incidentally buy more. Result being IKEA makes an extra 3 billion.
Yeah.
Euros, I believe.
Right.
So, I think those would be the two main things I would share around tech leadership right now. One is, let's really think about what we're doing and think about the principles. Instead of it being just how can we embed AI in everything, let's think about our customers. Let's think about the value we're providing them. The fundamentals haven't changed. The bottlenecks moved. The fundamentals haven't changed. So let's think about the value we provide to our customers, how we can best do that. And if AI is part of accelerating that, or even part of the product, fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you hit on a great insight there, which is that you're right. I remember one of the best pieces of advice anyone ever gave me was from my father, and he said, sleep on it, which I still use. And I feel like the world has lost that ability to stop and think for a second, right? We're just sort of like, everything is, I call it the instant generation. And the expectation is we will operate with, with evolved answers, with incomplete information, and always with a level of immediacy that's not always required, right? So I completely agree with you, and I think that is, it's beyond overwhelm. It's also this this ability of having to sort of navigate uncertainty in a way we've probably never had to before at this speed. And I love the example you gave about of IKEA, right? Because that's the way I think of AI: is how do you upskill people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you take the routine stuff away and then get them to do higher value things? But I don't think everyone's thinking about it. At least the industry is not selling it that way, right? Or they haven't been so far. Now they're a little scared because they've been talking about the job apocalypse, and they realize that's not a good sales tool, right? When, to, to, to tell the people you're selling it to.
I think the thing with system one and system two, Bannerman's thinking, is that we do need both.
Yeah.
As you say, there's a lot of uncertainty around. In fact, the approaches that I use, the solution focus approach that I use, and agile software development, they're both really focused on situations where there's high levels of complexity, uncertainty, and change. And there's two extremes here. One is analysis paralysis and attempting to plan the unplannable.
Yes.
When everything changes in weeks, a 5-year plan is useless. However, on the other side, we might think, well, in that case, we just have to make every decision now, rather than having a clear North Star and a clear understanding of our customers and what's important to them that enables us to make progress in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not and or anymore, right? I think that's the fundamental shift, or either or. It's and system one and system two. You need both now, in probably sometimes in the same situation. So I think that is an interesting shift. And I think all leaders are struggling with this across industries right now, maybe more so in technology, because they're sort of, the birthplace of this new tool. So, so now I want to dig into a little more into one of the other things you mentioned, which was, your experimentation. So you had a period where the work suddenly stopped flowing, right? Now, instead of just sitting and hoping it would come back, you actually went and tested 3 different market probes or hypotheses, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, right? So can you actually walk us through what one of those probes looked like in real life, not as theory, but the actual steps you took?
Sure. Let me preface that by the thing that came before it, which is that I noticed that mindfulness had become a big thing in the world, and I'd been doing it for 20 years, so it seemed like a wave to be ridden. And I got out there and rode that wave and created Brief Mindfulness. The website's still there. My first corporate client was Bupa. I was literally training mindfulness in the boardroom of Bupa. I was working with a UK university. It was going really, really well until it wasn't.
Right.
So it's like these waves can flow, and then you work really, really hard to catch them. And I mean, what happened with that one is I was too late to the party, basically. So
Right.
the wave had been peaking before, and I'd been thinking, corporate mindfulness, maybe, not convinced. But then it was happening, and I joined in for a bit, and then the wave passed. So at that point, that's the point where you were describing. Yes, the wave had passed, work wasn't flowing. So I specifically thought, what could I focus my marketing efforts on? And I wrote down the hypotheses.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I've forgotten the ones that failed, because they failed. The third one that I came to was my hypothesis was that agile coaches would be interested in solution focused coaching skills.
Right.
I want to learn, want to pay to be taught that. And so the first probe I did was to devote 2 weeks to just exploring that market as best I could, connecting with anyone who I knew connected with that. And the previous probes that I'd done, actually, one of them was, weirdly, I'd been invited as a mindfulness person to a debt collection conference.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, hey, surprise, surprise, debt collection is stressful.
Right. Yeah.
So the hypothesis that I had was I was leading a workshop at that point, and they told me to expect 40 or 50 people. So I said, great, okay. My hypothesis was, if I get 15 signups from this workshop of people who want to know more, then it's an area worth exploring.
Okay.
I only got 12 people at the conference, at the workshop.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, one person expressed interest in finding out more, and we talked about it. I wrote a proposal. As soon as they took it to the person in charge of the money, they decided that, well, yes, they were getting people burnt out, but no, it wasn't worth spending that money on stopping burnout.
Okay.
So, I felt sad about that for the people involved, because that's why I do all this, to help people have happier lives. But clearly that wasn't going to be a viable market. So that was a probe that failed. Then by contrast, I started just networking within Agile, people, second order connections, people who knew people I knew. And within a week, I had an invitation to speak at a conference in Pittsburgh. Now, bearing in mind, based in Cambridge in England, I thought that was a pretty good sign that this was a market worth exploring.
Right.
And to some extent it was.
Yeah.
There are people come along to Solutions Academy where I do my training, and Agile coaches come along to learn coaching skills. That happens to some degree. I had a wonderful group of, I think it was 6 Agile coaches who did a program with me that was, it was just brilliant. Everyone loved it, including me. But there wasn't the pull for that to continue. And I think there was an early sign of that I could have spotted if I'd been honest enough with myself.
Yeah.
So went along to an Agile, it was sort of like a mini conference. And there was a parallel track of people, doing different things. And I was like offering a track on coaching skills. And most people went to the other track. Not, and I didn't take that personally.
Yeah.
But I could see at that point, okay, there isn't the pull here. But I loved working with the people so much, I carried on, which professionally was a mistake. Personally, it's enriched my life. I've got some really good friends in that community. I really like those people. So yeah, mixed feelings around that one.
Yeah, well, and they were recommending you, right? So it's not like they saw something there. It just made sometimes the product market fit isn't quite there yet. Sometimes you're just too early into a market, right? So but what I love about it is you. And so I guess let me back up for a second. I'm curious. Were you actually building new frameworks, methodologies, whatever solutions for this market by this point, and reshaping your entire brand? Or were you just doing these mini sort of satellite launches to see without, completing everything around it?
I was definitely reaching my brand. Up to that point, I was trading as Kamara. So, I in this market, it turned out that wasn't so attractive.
Yeah.
So I started using my civil name again, Roy Marriott. So yeah, no, I definitely reshaped my brand around that. Um, I was very much looking for product market fit.
Yeah.
That was the aim at that point.
And do you feel like you gave it enough time? What's your, how do you gauge? Because sometimes it just takes a while for, you plant the seeds and it takes a while for it to take root and you don't see what's happening under the soil, right? Even though there's a lot of activity.
That is a really good question. I think if I had been 10 years earlier, and I would have been in a position to again catch the wave at the right place,
Yeah.
and establish the agile coaching training school, that could have worked.
Right.
The reality is that agile was already, if not across the chasm, certainly well on the way. And there were already people well established as coaching schools specializing in agile. So no, I don't think I think the decision should have been, from a purely business point of view, should have been very early on to see, okay, there is a pull to some extent. These are great people. I'm really enjoying it, but it's not enough of a pull to really turn it into a market.
Yeah, from a business standpoint. So I get that because sometimes you stick with your passion, but you have to. A brilliant guest I had on, she once said that whatever you do has to make your heart sing and your cash register go ka-ching. And she said both those things have to be true. It's not one or the other, right? But again, I think I'm a firm believer in experimenting and and just being able to understand when you need to pull out versus just sticking with it and hoping that there will be some fruition from it, right? And I don't think you can time that, just like you can't time the market, right? So, yeah. But it's a good lesson learned. So, staying on that for a second, there is one wave you did catch, right? There was an unexpected opening you mentioned where during the pandemic, you taught trainers how to train online. Now, you said the learning there was to jump on the bandwagon, but I also feel like you're more circumspect about AI, right? So how do you decide when a trend is worth adapting to and when it sort of risks pulling you away from the real work?
I mean, that what happened then was that there was a confluence. So I had been delivering training and coaching online since 2008. And we came to 2020. And, of course, as we all know, everything shut down. I immediately resisted the temptation. My first instinct was to resist the temptation to jump on this passing fad. I could see that people were going to need to learn to do online training, but I thought, well, it's going to be a distraction away from the main thing I'm focused on. Fortunately, a month or two later, someone came along to me and put a proposal to me and said, would you help a few of our people? And then, by the way, we have a mailing list of 20,000. Can we invite a few other people? And that way you get paid. So, this is sounding better and better. And it turned out that combination of basically being the right person at the right time to catch this immediate wave skyrocketed my business.
Yeah.
And, July 2020, I had 3 months of work if I'd wanted it, The other thing that made it really work, though, was that what became clear was that it wasn't about teaching people how to use which button to press on Zoom.
Yeah.
There was some of that for sure, but there was a really good, really, really clear signal coming through loud and clear, which was, how do we engage people with remote training?
Yeah.
That was the challenge they were facing. And I love making experiences in the workplace more engaging for people. What I do as a trainer is what I do as a coach, is what I want to be supporting leaders I coach to be doing. Um, so it turned out that it became this confluence of the 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 people who needed something that I was able to give in a way that was really fitting my values, and it was something I really wanted to give.
Yeah, and interestingly, when as you talk about that, I immediately see a product market fit, right? Because you're great at engaging people, and one of the most, and I went through this, with most challenging thing even today is how do you keep a room of 20 people engaged on Zoom when half the people have the camera off and they're not, they're not paying attention. It's so it is a challenge, but that is, you sort of took that skill set and adapted it into this new world that we were facing at the time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it
So
was falling off a log for me. It was like
yeah.
just showing people what I do. The challenge was working out where they were at and how how much I needed to show them to help them to find their way forward.
Yeah. So now you've built models for feedback, negotiation, time management. You talked about that, procrastination. Now, for a solopreneur listening who feels buried under their own to-do list, what is
Mhm.
one practical model or question they could use this week?
What's the one biggest outcome that you would like this week to achieve? And what's my first small step to move in that direction? And just to fill that out a bit, I'm using the word outcome very, very carefully. So it's not output. It's not about doing this, sending that. It's outcome. So it's about, maybe it's customers signing up. Maybe it's about, if we're talking coaches, maybe it's about discovery calls booked. Some result that comes through other people doing something differently that supports the direction you want to go in.
Yeah, no, I love that, because you're right. One of the dangers of solopreneurship is, or anything you do on your own, is you can get caught up in busy work, right? That
Exactly.
feels really important. That feels like, but
Yeah.
if you're not moving the needle, so I love the difference between output and outcome, because we create a lot of output every day, but
Yeah.
is it actually getting you to the result that you want? No, I think that's great advice. All right, so last question before we get to a rapid fire round. If you were to give one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you
Mhm.
tell them?
Don't quit the day job until you've got product market fit.
Great advice. Yeah, I always tell people, use your salary as venture capital to start, figuring out your side hustle. But I think that's really important, because there's this romantic notion of I jump without a parachute, right? Not always a good idea. So unless, you've got a trust fund that you can fall back on. So oh, all right. This brings us to a rapid fire round, Roy. Nothing stressful, just, one word or one sentence answers. Uh, what's the best question anyone has ever asked you?
What else?
Love it. What's the most British thing about you?
That I'm capable of constructing sentences that, while they do eventually get to the point, they are somewhat careful in the way that they get there so as to avoid offending anybody.
Well, I look at it as the ski slope, Roy. It was very elegant the way you go down that slope. So I have no complaints. Now, you you can put one sentence on a whiteboard that every tech leader in the world has to read. What is it?
What do our customers need?
Yeah, important. If your work had a warning label, what would it say?
You may find yourself developing not just as a professional, but as a human being.
That's your tagline, Roy. Last one. Hexadecimal or mindfulness? If you could only use one to solve a complex team conflict, which one are you picking?
Oh, mindfulness.
Easy winner there. Well, Roy, thank you so much. That
So,
brings us to the end of the session, Roy. Thank you so much for a delightful conversation and for taking us down that ski slope so elegantly.
You're very welcome, Nikhil. It's been a delight being here. Thank you for all your excellent questions.
There are 4 lessons from my conversation with Roy that I think are worth sitting with. The first is this: breadth can be a strength, but only after someone knows where to enter. Roy has done a lot: tech, coaching, mindfulness, solutions focus, NLP, agile, supervision, teaching, writing. And all of that gives him deep expertise and an ability to connect dots that others might not see. But he also shared something very honest, which is that when people see all of it at once, it can be overwhelming. That is such an important lesson for coaches. Your experience is not the problem. Your resume is not the problem. Your range is not the problem. The problem is when you put all that furniture outside the front door and expect a prospect to figure out where to walk in. People do not buy the totality of your life experience. They buy the piece that feels most relevant to the problem they're trying to solve right now. So the question is not, how do I show people everything I can do? The better question is, what is the clearest front door into my work? The second lesson I want to pull out is Roy's idea of market probes. He didn't just panic when the work dried up. He designed small, time-bound experiments with clear hypotheses and clear success criteria. Like, if I get 15 signups from this workshop, it's worth exploring. He got 12. One person expressed real interest. He wrote a proposal. The person holding the budget said no. Done. That's not failure. That's a clean read before doing all the heavy lifting of pivoting your brand and business strategy. So here's how I think about applying that learning. Before you rebuild your website or create a new offer or go all in on a new niche, give yourself 2 weeks. That's it. Your only job is to test whether there's real pull in that direction. Talk to people, go where they gather, see if they lean in. You'll know faster than you think. Don't do what many solopreneurs do, which is we fall in love with an idea, we build the whole thing, invest months of time and energy, and then feel devastated when it doesn't work. Roy's approach flips that. You're validating the market exists before you tie the knot with the idea. The third lesson is an important one, and it's the difference between output and outcome. Roy offered a deceptively simple question. What is the biggest outcome you want to achieve this week? And what is the first small step toward it? That word outcome really matters because solopreneurs are very good at creating output: posts, emails, offers, pages, notes, plans, ideas, updates, tweaks. And all of it can feel really productive. But the real test is whether any of it is moving the business towards an actual result, towards a business outcome, a discovery call booked, a proposal sent, a past client reactivated, a clearer offer named, or a conversation started with the right kind of prospect. That is where I think a lot of solo businesses quietly drift. They confuse motion and productivity with progress. They finish the week exhausted, but when they look back, very little has actually changed. So before you write another post, redesign another web page, or rethink your offer for the 5th time, ask yourself, what is the outcome this is supposed to create? If you cannot answer that, you may be doing work that makes you feel productive, but does nothing to make your business stronger. And the final lesson is this: loving the work is not the same as having a business that works. Roy said something near the end that every aspiring solopreneur should probably write down. Don't quit the day job until you've got product market fit. And I know that runs against the romantic version of solopreneurship, where you burn the boats, leap into the unknown without a parachute, and trust the universe to catch you. But that is not a strategy. That's a Hollywood ending. Here's how I always tell people to think about going solo. Use your current salary as venture capital to start figuring out your business. Build your side hustle to test the market, experiment with offers, have real conversations, and find out whether people will actually open their wallets for what you want to build. Don't just listen for polite compliments. Listen for buying behavior. Are they booking the discovery call? Are they asking the next strategic question? Are they putting down a deposit? That behavior is your signal to make the leap, not just passion alone. Here's my challenge to you this week, and it's a diagnostic test for your business. Look at your calendar that you have lined up for the next 5 days, or look at your current to-do list. I want you to brutally filter every single item through the lens Roy shared. Ask yourself, how many of these things are just outputs that keep me feeling productive, and how many are actually tied to business outcomes? If you look at your week and realize it is 100% outputs, just tweaking messaging, writing social posts, or having networking conversations, I want you to pause. Clear off one block of time, pick one revenue driving outcome, and take the first small step toward it before you fill the week with more activity. So stop tracking how busy you are and start tracking whether the work is actually moving the business forward. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you're already good at what you do, but the market isn't seeing it the way your best clients do, that's not a skill problem, that's a positioning problem. And that's exactly what a brand clarity session is designed to surface. In 45 minutes, we'll identify where the friction is hiding in your messaging, your positioning, and how you're showing up, and what it's costing you. If that sounds like a conversation you've been needing, the link to book is in the show notes. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.